Hotel staff mocked a black woman guest, then froze when she revealed. She was the CEO. The room went silent as the elevator doors opened. Kennedy Blake stepped out into the marbled lobby of the Ellsworth Grand Hotel, the clicking of her heels echoing like gunfire. Heads turned. Not because she was making a scene, she wasn't. Not because she was shouting, she wasn't. It was something else. The way she carried herself. Calm, intentional, unapologetic. But she was also covered in coffee. Fresh espresso dripped from her coat collar, staining the ivory fabric of her blouse. Her tight curls, usually impeccable, were dampened on one side. The culprit, a young concierge named Madison, stood frozen near the front desk, her face flushed crimson. Just minutes earlier, Madison had accidentally bumped into Kennedy while carrying a tray of complimentary drinks. But it wasn't just a clumsy spill, it was the dismissive glance after. The mumbled, "Oh well, maybe next time wear something less designer." The muffled laughter from two receptionists nearby, the subtle, practiced cruelty that Kennedy had encountered her whole life, but hadn't felt in a while. What Madison didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Kennedy Blake wasn't just another guest checking into the penthouse suite. She was the new CEO of Blake Holdings International, the investment group that had recently acquired a majority stake in the entire Ellsworth hotel chain. And she had come here in disguise, under a pseudonym, to conduct a private audit on the customer service experience. Unannounced, unfiltered, unforgiving. "Ma'am," a supervisor finally approached her. "We can get you a fresh towel and possibly a change of clothes. Or maybe we can call you a cab." Kennedy tilted her head slightly. "Is that your idea of hospitality?" she asked, her tone soft but icy. He blinked. "We just don't usually have many guests like you in the executive suites. Not without advanced confirmation." There it was. She paused. Her eyes scanned the gilded lobby, taking in the subtle looks of discomfort, the fake smiles, the careful avoidance. She had played this game before, but this time she was holding the cards. 30 minutes earlier, Kennedy had arrived at the hotel incognito. Her assistant, Lionel, had booked her reservation under the name Kay Benson. No title, no fanfare. Just a high-value client checking in during peak hours. She wore minimal makeup, flats instead of heels, and a coat that hid her designer bag. She wanted the real experience. The treatment a regular black woman might receive walking into a 5-star hotel alone. From the moment she stepped out of the black car, she noticed the shift in tone. The white valet barely looked at her before waving her off to the side. The front desk clerk, a blond man with a badge that read Derek, looked up with forced patience. "Yes," he said. "I'm here to check in," she replied. "Under Benson, Kay." He glanced at his screen, his fingers moving slowly over the keyboard. Benson. Executive suite. One night. Huh? Nothing?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We just usually see more corporate clients booking this floor. I'll need a credit card and photo ID." She handed both over silently. As he scanned the card, he muttered something she caught just barely. Didn't even bother dressing up for it. She let it slide. Then came the coffee accident in the elevator lounge, followed by the mocking whisper from Madison about trying too hard to look rich. It was textbook condescension, thinly veiled, politely vicious. But Kennedy hadn't risen from a foster care background in Baltimore to CEO of a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate by letting things slide forever. Back in the lobby, Lionel walked in with a man in a gray suit, trailing behind him. Kennedy looked at the man, nodded slightly, and he stepped forward. He opened a sleek leather binder and placed it on the counter. Madison Derrick and the supervisor leaned in, curious. It was a formal notice from the Blake Holdings Board of Directors. Effective immediately, Kennedy Blake was assuming executive oversight of the Ellsworth Grand Hotel's operations, part of her new initiative for cultural and leadership reforms across the chain. Kennedy slowly unbuttoned her coat, revealing a crisp white blouse beneath. The coffee stain stood out, but she didn't flinch. "I was here for a reason," she said, "and thank you. You've made it very clear where the problems begin." Derrick stammered. "Wait, are you saying you're the—" Kennedy didn't answer. She simply walked past them, toward the executive elevator, but not before turning briefly to Madison. "You should be more careful," she said quietly, "when deciding who deserves your respect." Madison opened her mouth, but nothing came out. And just like that, the woman they thought was a nobody disappeared into the elevator, leaving behind a silence more powerful than any reprimand. 2 days earlier, Kennedy Blake stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her New York City office, watching the snowfall blur the skyline. The boardroom behind her buzzed with tension. Her name was already making waves in the business press after her rapid rise to CEO of Blake Holdings International. But this was personal. "The Ellsworth acquisition is complete," Lionel said, placing a thick folder on the table. "Effective as of 9 a.m. today, we now own 62% of the chain." Kennedy turned slowly, her eyes sharp. "And the Grand?" "The flagship," Lionel confirmed, "where most of the complaints come from." She opened the folder and scanned the reports, discrimination claims, reviews flagged for racist service, complaints from black guests about being ignored, questioned, overcharged. A pattern, a quiet one, but real. "What's the status on the internal review?" she asked. "We sent mystery shoppers, but nothing concrete. Staff knows when they're being tested." "So we don't go as executives," she said. "We go as targets." Lionel blinked. "You mean—" "I want the truth, Lionel. I want to see who they are when they think I'm no one." A silence settled. "You really want to put yourself through that?" Kennedy gave a dry smile. "I grew up in Baltimore, remember? This isn't new to me. But it's new to them. Someone watching. Someone who can change things." She would book under a different name, wear casual clothes, and arrive alone. No driver, no entourage, just a woman checking into a hotel. And now she knew exactly what they thought of her. Flash forward to the aftermath of the lobby confrontation. Kennedy sat alone in the suite, her suite, wrapped in a plush white robe. Steam rose from a cup of herbal tea. Her laptop lay open on the desk beside her, and her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She was writing a report documenting every interaction, every name, every subtle act of bias. Not to destroy careers, but to rebuild systems. A knock at the door broke the silence. She opened it to find Madison standing awkwardly with a room service cart. Her eyes avoided Kennedy's. I was told to bring your dinner up personally," Madison mumbled. Kennedy said nothing at first. She stepped aside, allowing the young woman in. The tray held a silver cloche, a bottle of water, a linen napkin folded precisely. Madison placed it on the table, then hesitated. "Look, I didn't know who you were," she blurted suddenly. "If I had, I never would have—" Kennedy cut her off. "That's exactly the problem." Madison swallowed hard. I thought you were one of those—" She stopped herself. "One of those what?" Kennedy asked quietly. Madison stared at the floor. "People who fake being rich. Try too hard, I've seen it before." "And you decided to humiliate me over it?" "I didn't mean to." "You didn't have to mean it," Kennedy said. "You just had to believe it." Madison looked ready to cry. Kennedy's voice softened, but not out of sympathy, out of resolve. "Let me ask you something. If I had been a white woman in a designer coat, would you have spilled that coffee? Madison's silence said it all. Leave the cart, Kennedy said. You can go. Madison turned to leave, but before she reached the door, Kennedy added, You're not being fired. Not yet, but you will be retrained, and I'll be watching. Downstairs, Lionel met with the hotel's general manager, a man named Clark Whitmore. Polished, silver-haired, and arrogant, he was already fuming at the day's events. You let her walk in here like some guest? Clark snapped. She is a guest, Lionel said calmly, and your new boss. Clark scoffed. That's not how this works. We have policies, protocols. You can't just barge into a hospitality system like this and rewrite the rules. Funny, Lionel said, standing. That's exactly what we plan to do. Clark's smirk faded. We're starting with diversity audits, internal restructuring, and yes, mandatory training for every employee who's interacted with Ms. Blake. Training? Clark snapped. For what? For how not to lose your job. Clark stood, his face tightening. I've worked in hospitality for 30 years. I know what excellence looks like. Then it should have been easy to spot, Lionel said, nodding toward the elevators. Clark didn't respond. That night, Kennedy sat on the balcony of her suite, the city glittering below. She wasn't satisfied yet. This was just the beginning. She didn't just want to catch bad behavior. She wanted to change a culture. Her phone buzzed, a text from her younger sister, Brielle. Saw you trending on Twitter, again. Did they mess with the wrong Blake? Kennedy smiled faintly and replied, Always. But in her heart, she knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, about showing every black woman who'd ever been treated like less that she wasn't alone. And tomorrow, when she met the board and revealed her findings, the real work would begin. The conference room on the 23rd floor of Blake Holdings buzzed with tension. Kennedy stood at the head of the table, framed by the Manhattan skyline behind her. Her eyes scanned the room, department heads, PR officers, legal advisors, and a few board members who still hadn't figured out who exactly was in charge now. She clicked the remote. A photo appeared on the massive screen behind her, grainy security footage from the hotel lobby. Madison's sneer, Kennedy's shocked but composed face, the spilled coffee, the way other guests turned to stare but the staff stood idle. You're probably wondering why this is on your screen, Kennedy began. Let me make it simple. That woman is me. A few gasps, the shifting of chairs. This is what happens when power walks in quietly, she continued. When it wears sneakers instead of red bottoms. When it looks like me. Someone near the end of the table, Donovan Reed, head of operations, cleared his throat. I'm sorry, Kennedy, but are we really going to escalate a customer service mishap into a company-wide crisis? Kennedy didn't blink. Donovan, this isn't a customer service mishap. This is a systemic culture of exclusion, one we now own. She turned to the screen again and clicked through images, pages of internal complaints, a letter from a black couple wrongly accused of credit card fraud, a pregnant Latina woman denied valet service. The Grand isn't broken because of bad coffee or late check-ins. It's broken because people like Madison aren't outliers. They're symptoms. Donovan looked away. And we are not a company that lets symptoms grow into disease, Kennedy said. Not anymore. At that, Lionel handed out sealed folders. Inside, you'll find our immediate plan, Kennedy said. Every department is involved, no exceptions. The silence was thick as pages rustled. Some nodded. Others looked panicked. You're going to make enemies, muttered one board member under his breath. Kennedy met his gaze directly. Only the right ones. Later that afternoon, Kennedy returned to her office to find Brielle lounging on the sofa with a tablet in her lap and a box of macarons in her hand. "You're trending again," Brielle said without looking up. "CEO Yoon masked." Kennedy dropped her bag and exhaled. "What's the general mood?" "Half the internet thinks you're a badass. The other half thinks it was all a PR stunt." Kennedy smiled wryly. "Of course they do." Brielle leaned forward. "But this clip, it's gone viral." She turned the tablet. Footage from a guest who had been standing nearby when Madison spilled the coffee. The clip caught the exact moment Madison recognized Kennedy's name. Her face froze. The hush in the room. Kennedy's calm, unbothered exit. "You look like you walked out of a movie," Brielle said. "Like some Olivia Pope hybrid with better posture." Kennedy laughed despite herself. "Glad I can entertain." "No," Brielle said seriously. "You didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for every woman who's been looked down on, every black guest who's been doubted. That clip, people are watching it because they've been you." Kennedy's phone buzzed, a private number. She answered. "Miss Blake," the voice said, sharp, clipped. "This is Clark Whitmore." She sat upright. "I'd appreciate a meeting." "Regarding?" "The future of the Grand, and perhaps mine." They met at a small cafe in Soho. Neutral territory. Clark arrived in a dark suit, looking exhausted. His arrogance had dimmed but not disappeared. Kennedy didn't offer to shake his hand. "I came here because I believe we got off on the wrong foot," he started. "You insulted me, dismissed me, and enabled a culture that humiliated me." Clark's jaw tightened. "And I regret that, truly, but I have to protect my staff. They're scared. Some of them are good people." "Then they'll adapt," Kennedy said. "The ones who can't won't stay." Clark leaned forward. "I'm asking you to consider the ripple effect. You come in with policies and trainings and people panic. But they don't change. They dig in. That's not my concern. My concern is results." He studied her. "You're not just angry, are you?" "I've been angry for 20 years, she said. "Now I'm in charge." That landed hard. Clark nodded slowly. "Then give me a chance. Let me help fix what I let fester." Kennedy looked at him for a long moment. "You want to keep your job?" "I want to earn it." That evening, Kennedy sat at her desk reading an email from a young employee at the Grand, a housekeeper named Raina. It read, "I saw what you did. I've worked there 11 years. No one's ever stood up for us. They treat guests badly, and they treat us worse. Thank you for seeing us." Kennedy stared at the screen. Something inside her shifted. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about people like Raina, about setting a precedent. Tomorrow she'd announce the staff-wide audit. The retraining would begin. But tonight she allowed herself a rare moment of stillness. And somewhere in the hotel across town, Madison sat on the edge of her bed, reading a company-wide memo. Subject: new leadership transition and immediate conduct review. Her hands trembled. Because she realized something that hit her harder than any press headline ever could. Kennedy Blake wasn't just her boss now. She was the storm. The next morning, Kennedy arrived at the Grand unannounced. She stepped through the lobby, the same space where she'd been mocked, disrespected, and dismissed. Only now, every set of eyes turned with a different kind of recognition. No one dared whisper. No one rolled their eyes. Clark Whitmore trailed a few feet behind her, trying to maintain composure as his staff scrambled to straighten ties, pull jackets closed, and offer robotic greetings. Madison stood at the concierge desk, visibly tense. She froze when Kennedy walked by. Their eyes met for one unrelenting second. Madison looked away first. Kennedy paused. "Miss Reynolds," she said evenly. Madison turned back, stiff. Yes, ma'am. We'll be speaking later, privately. A single nod from Kennedy, and she walked away. Madison's face drained of color. Upstairs in the executive conference room, the mood was taut. Department heads from the Grand were seated, eyes darting between each other and the door. Most had heard the rumors. None had seen the full storm coming. Kennedy entered with Lionel, her executive assistant, by her side. She took the center seat, not at the far end, but directly in the middle. It was subtle, but it said everything. She didn't waste time. I want every department head to stand up and tell me what they've done in the past year to address discrimination and bias. One by one. Let's begin with human resources. The room fell deathly silent. Angela Kim, head of HR, looked like she'd swallowed glass. We, conducted a general survey last June, she stammered, and we posted new hotline posters in the staff lounge. Did you follow up on the 2 complaints about front desk discrimination in July? Kennedy asked. Angela blinked. No, ma'am, she said quietly. Kennedy nodded. Then I'll count that as a no action taken. Next. One by one, the excuses fell apart. PR mumbled about reputation risk management. Housekeeping claimed they had no authority. Security denied knowledge of racial profiling, despite several written grievances Kennedy had already reviewed. By the time the last manager sat down, the air was thick with discomfort. You all failed, Kennedy said. Not just me, not just your guests, but your own teams. She leaned forward. This is not about saving face. This is about cleaning house. Lionel began distributing packets, mandatory training protocols, disciplinary reviews, staff interviews, and anonymous audits. One manager raised his hand, voice low. And if we refuse, Kennedy stood, then you're no longer welcome here. There was no anger in her tone, just certainty. Back in the lobby, Madison was called to the newly designated Integrity Office. She entered, trying to look composed. Kennedy waited inside, alone. Sit, she said. Madison sat stiffly. I'm not going to yell, Kennedy began, but I am going to be honest. Madison tried to interrupt. I know what you must think. Kennedy held up a hand. I think you judged someone based on their skin, clothes, and the way they walked through a door. I think you assumed I didn't belong because I didn't match the profile of who you think deserves our respect. Madison's voice cracked. I didn't know who you were. And that's the point, Kennedy said. You shouldn't need someone's resume to treat them like a human being. Madison's lip trembled. Are you firing me? Kennedy studied her. No, she said slowly. Not yet. Madison looked up, startled. You'll undergo full retraining. You'll shadow staff from housekeeping, valet, and guest services. Every role you used to look down on. And if, after that, you still don't get it, then yes, I'll let you go. Madison's jaw clenched. Kennedy added, But this isn't about punishment. It's about whether you want to be better. Madison didn't reply. Kennedy stood. You can go. That evening, Kennedy walked the service halls of the Grand, areas no executive had stepped into in years. She talked with dishwashers, chatted with bellhops, and sat for 15 minutes with Raina, the housekeeper who had emailed her. You remembered me, Raina said, astonished. Of course, Kennedy said. Raina hesitated, then whispered, They're scared now. Management. Like you're going to flip everything upside down. I am, Kennedy said with a soft smile. But for the right reasons. Raina wiped a tear away with her sleeve. As Kennedy stepped back into the lobby, a family approached, black. Weary from travel and clearly ignored by the front desk. She didn't hesitate. Hi, Kennedy said warmly. Welcome to the Grand. I'm Kennedy Blake, CEO. Let me take care of you personally. Their eyes widened. A little girl reached for Kennedy's hand. "You're the lady from the video," she said. Kennedy knelt beside her. "And you're the reason I'm here." From across the room, Madison watched, and for the first time her shame turned into something different. Awareness, maybe even the beginning of change. And upstairs, Clark Whitmore sat in his office, watching the scene unfold on the security feed. He leaned back in his chair and whispered to no one in particular. This hotel just found its soul again. The news spread like a wildfire. By midweek, headlines had already picked up the story. Black CEO exposes discrimination at her own hotel. Kennedy Blake shakes up the Grand. And corporate America's wake-up call comes from within. Major networks requested interviews. Social media erupted with hashtags like #respect is not optional and #CEO in disguise. Videos of Kennedy stepping into the lobby that morning were looped endlessly with awe-filled captions. Inside the hotel, the energy had shifted, but not entirely for the better. Some employees walked on eggshells, unsure how to engage with Kennedy now. Others whispered behind closed doors, questioning her motives. The senior leadership team, especially those complicit in the hotel's toxic culture, began subtly resisting her reforms. But Kennedy saw it all coming. That morning she called an emergency meeting. She entered the room, silent and calm, but her presence sliced through the tension like a knife. "I know some of you are uncomfortable," she began, "but let me be clear. Discomfort is not the same as injustice, and what we've allowed to grow in this place is injustice." Clark shifted uncomfortably beside her. Before she could continue, a hand went up. It was Brent Holloway, the director of finance, an older white man who had been with the company for 2 decades. "With all due respect," he said cautiously, "I don't think turning this place into a public spectacle is the best move. We've built a brand here. Investors are nervous. Staff morale is shaking." Kennedy tilted her head. "You're worried about morale." "I'm worried about damage," Brent clarified. To the hotel, to your legacy." Kennedy took a beat. "My legacy," she echoed. "Let me tell you what my legacy was about to be. Until last week, I was the invisible owner of a hotel that mistreated its guests and ignored its workers. And it wasn't until I showed up in sneakers and natural curls that I became visible at all." Silence. Another voice chimed in. Angela Kim from HR. "To be fair, not everyone knew. Your identity was kept under wraps." Kennedy looked straight at her. "And isn't that the problem? That people only act decently when they know someone has power?" The room stilled. Clark finally stepped in. "She's right." All eyes turned to him. "I saw what happened. I let it slide too many times. Kennedy, I owe you more than a private apology. I owe you action." It was a surprising admission. Even Kennedy blinked. "Then start by helping me lead this," she said. "Not manage it. Lead." He nodded slowly. Downstairs, the atmosphere was shifting. Raina from housekeeping now stood confidently at a morning team huddle, briefing newer staff. Jamal, the front desk night shift lead who had long felt overlooked, was asked to join the Guest Experience Council. Kennedy personally reviewed applications for leadership positions and pulled forward names that had been stuck in pending for months, most of them Black, Latino, or women. But trouble was brewing. Late that night, an anonymous post appeared on a private hospitality industry forum. It accused Kennedy of orchestrating the incident for PR, claiming she had staged the whole thing to boost her own profile. The post was vague, no proof, but it gained traction. By morning, the damage was visible. An online tabloid had picked it up. The comments were brutal. Reverse racism at its finest. She used her race and gender to manipulate sympathy. She's just another woke executive milking cancel culture. Kennedy stared at the screen, stone-faced. Lionel, her assistant, looked nervous. Should we get ahead of it? Release a formal statement? Deny everything? No, Kennedy said quietly. He blinked. Nothing? Kennedy shook her head. We don't respond with panic. We respond with proof. Later that evening, Kennedy walked into the ballroom where a quarterly town hall had been scheduled for staff. The room was packed. Tension buzzed. She stepped to the mic, not behind the podium, but in front of it, eye level. There are rumors, there's noise, and some of you may be wondering if what happened here was real, or if I used it. She looked around. I didn't plan to be mistreated, but I also didn't hide who I was to be clever. I did it because I needed to see this place, this system, from the ground level. And what I found wasn't just one bad interaction. It was a pattern. She paused. And I don't need anyone's permission to change that. A slow clap started at the back of the room. Raina. Then Jamal joined in. Then a few more. Within seconds, the room erupted in applause. Some staff even stood. Kennedy swallowed, emotions catching her off guard for the first time. This wasn't about the headlines anymore. It was about truth, messy, public and painful, but finally out in the open. And she wasn't backing down. The sun had barely risen when Kennedy's inbox exploded. Dozens of messages from news outlets, screenshots of smear posts circulating online. A new article had surfaced, anonymous sources, twisted timelines, and claims that Kennedy had baited hotel staff for a publicity stunt. By 8 a.m., her publicist called in a panic. You need to respond. They're painting you like some calculated villain who set everyone up. Kennedy listened silently, her fingers gently drumming the mahogany desk in her office. I'm not giving in to manufactured chaos, she said flatly. We've got work to do. But deep down, something simmered. This was no longer just internet noise. Someone wanted her out, and they were willing to manipulate the narrative to make it happen. At that very moment, Clark stormed into her office. Have you seen this? He asked, dropping a printout on her desk. Internal emails. Someone leaked them. They're trying to say you planted the undercover visit and forced staff to act a certain way. That you set up Monica. Kennedy leaned forward. The email thread included an old scheduling note between Lionel and hotel security, referencing her upcoming visit, details taken out of context. This wasn't supposed to be public, she murmured. Someone's digging. Clark frowned. It's a targeted hit. They're hoping to undermine everything before you can rebuild. Her jaw tightened. Then we expose them before they bury us. Later that day, Kennedy called a private meeting with Lionel. Pull up everything, Yimbam, she ordered. I want IP logs, employee login history. Find out who accessed those emails. Lionel hesitated. You think it's someone high up? I don't think, I know. Within hours, Lionel returned with a name. Brent Holloway. Kennedy's blood ran cold. The same man who'd pushed back in the leadership meeting. The man who warned her about legacy damage. He had leaked the emails, coordinated with bloggers, and even contacted a right-wing media outlet to push a smear campaign. And worse, he'd done it from the hotel's executive suite, under a guest alias. Kennedy sat still for a long time, then stood. The next morning, Kennedy scheduled an all-hands meeting, no exceptions. The ballroom buzzed with tension as every department head and team lead took their seat. When Brent walked in, he acted casual, even offered a thin smile in Kennedy's direction. She didn't smile back. When everyone settled, she stepped forward and played a short video clip on the massive screen behind her, security camera footage, Brent entering the suite under a false name, Brent accessing the hotel server from his laptop. Brent making a late-night call, audio enhanced. She thinks she owns this place, but she doesn't own the truth. A gasp rippled through the room. Brent's face turned the color of ash. Kennedy turned to him. "You were right about one thing," she said, her voice sharp as ice. "This is about legacy, but not mine. Yours." Security guards appeared at the ballroom entrance. "Brent Holloway, your employment is terminated effective immediately. Legal proceedings have already begun." He stood, shaking, trying to speak, but no words came out. The staff didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just watched, because they needed to see it happen. Justice, public, clear. Later that evening, Kennedy sat alone in her office, the adrenaline finally wearing off. The hotel was quiet. For once, truly quiet. Clark knocked gently on the door. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "Just tired." "You won today," he said. "But what's next?" She looked out the window at the skyline. "I don't want to win. I want to change something. Permanently." Clark stepped inside. "Then let's make sure this doesn't just end with Brent." Kennedy's eyes met his. "Exactly. The rot runs deeper, and I'm not leaving until it's rooted out." In the hallway outside, Raina passed by Jamal. She whispered, "Did you see his face?" Jamal grinned, frozen, like he'd seen a ghost. Raina chuckled, then turned serious. "She's not just fixing a hotel, she's building something new." And for the first time, it felt possible. Kennedy stood behind the tinted glass of the executive conference room, watching as the lobby below pulsed with activity. Her hotel was alive again. Guests chatted, bellhops moved with purpose, and the cold, transactional energy that once haunted the building had shifted into something warmer, something human. But she wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Clark entered, holding a folder with the latest audit reports and HR interviews. "It's spreading," he said, handing it to her. 3 more staff members stepped forward. They said Brent wasn't working alone. Kennedy flipped through the pages, her face unreadable. "Names?" "Raina," Clark answered quietly. "And Jamal." Her hand stopped mid-turn. "That can't be right. Raina was the first one who showed remorse." Clark hesitated. "That's why it stings. But apparently she was involved early on, helped create the fake profiles to spread those rumors about you before your identity was known. Jamal, too. He ran interference, so Brent could access the servers unnoticed." Kennedy said nothing for a long time, her gaze fixed on the distant reflection of herself in the glass. She wasn't angry, she was disappointed. And somewhere, deep in her chest, something cracked a little. "I want to talk to them," she said. Raina entered the office first, nervous, eyes low. Kennedy didn't waste time. "Why?" Raina's voice shook. "I didn't know who you were. Brent said you were just another power chaser trying to cash in on the diversity trend. I bought it. I helped, and then I saw you. Actually saw you, and I wanted out. That's why I warned you." Kennedy leaned back. "But you never admitted it." "I was scared." Kennedy didn't flinch. "You weren't scared when you mocked me in the elevator, when you whispered behind my back in the lounge. You were only scared once you realized I could end you." Tears welled in Raina's eyes. "You already did." Jamal walked in next, stiff, defensive. "I followed orders," he said flatly. "I thought you were a decoy, someone sent to ruin our numbers so Brent could take over." Kennedy arched a brow. "And that made it okay to humiliate me?" Jamal didn't answer. Clark stepped forward. "We can terminate them both today." But Kennedy raised a hand. "No," she said. "Let the staff decide." Clark blinked. "Excuse me?" We hold a vote, not just about Reina and Jamal, but about the kind of workplace we want this to be. Let everyone speak. No secrets, no whisper campaigns. Clark looked uneasy. That's risky, Kennedy nodded. So is pretending we've fixed anything. 2 days later, the hotel ballroom transformed into a town hall. Every employee, from janitors to top managers, took a seat. Reina and Jamal sat near the front, visibly shaken. Clark facilitated, but Kennedy stood silently in the back, watching. One by one, employees stepped up. Some demanded accountability. Others shared their own moments of complicity. Times they stayed silent, laughed along, or said nothing when injustice unfolded. Then Reina stood. She didn't plead. She told the truth. I thought I was better than the people I mocked, but the truth is, I just didn't want to be the target. I followed Brent because he made me feel powerful, and now all I feel is ashamed. Silence followed, and then slow claps. A few at first, then more. When Jamal stood, he didn't speak right away. He looked around the room, saw faces he had judged, dismissed, hurt. I can't undo what I did, he said. But if this place has a shot at being better, I want to be part of making that happen. Or I'll leave. Whatever you decide. Kennedy stepped forward then, just once, to address them all. Leadership isn't about revenge. It's about responsibility. But this is your place too, so own it. The vote was held anonymously. Surprisingly, Reina and Jamal stayed, but not without conditions: public apologies, community outreach hours, and direct mentorship under Kennedy herself. Later, in the quiet of her office, Kennedy sat across from Clark. You sure you're okay with this? He asked. No, she said honestly. But healing doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it just feels necessary. Outside, laughter echoed from the lobby. Inside, something long overdue was finally beginning. The soft hum of evening jazz filtered through the rooftop lounge as Kennedy leaned against the balcony railing. Below, the city sparkled, each light a reminder of just how far she'd come, how far they all had. The hotel now pulsed with new energy, not just from its upscale renovations or the gourmet menus, but from something deeper: change. She took a sip of her drink and turned as footsteps approached. It was Mrs. Patel, the housekeeper who had once been scolded for hovering too long around high-profile guests. Now she wore a tailored navy blazer, the new standard uniform for senior staff. She beamed with quiet pride. Ms. Rhodes, she said gently, the guests in Suite 1603 asked if you'd like to join them. They're celebrating a successful merger. Said your kindness helped seal their stay. Kennedy smiled. Tell them I'll stop by in 20. Mrs. Patel nodded and turned to leave, but paused. Thank you for everything. Kennedy watched her go, the smile fading into something more thoughtful. Gratitude was never what she'd come here looking for. But now it followed her everywhere. Inside, the soft chime of her phone broke her reverie. A video message from Brent. She almost ignored it, but something made her tap play. The image flickered to life. Brent sat in a sparse apartment, dressed in a faded hoodie, no smugness in sight. I doubt you'll listen to this, he began, voice low. I lost everything, and I deserved it. But I need you to know, I wasn't just cruel. I was scared. Scared that someone like you, someone better, could walk in and succeed without permission. I made it my job to stop that, and you still won. Not just over me, over all of us. Kennedy said nothing. The screen went black. She slipped the phone back into her pocket. Downstairs, the hotel ballroom buzzed with energy. Tonight was the first Voices of Valor gala, an initiative Kennedy had launched to highlight the journeys of underrepresented workers in the hospitality industry. Formerly invisible staff now stood on stage sharing their stories, how they got here, what they endured, and why they stayed. Raina gave a speech that brought the crowd to its feet. Clark stood at the edge of the room watching her. "She's good," he said to Kennedy as she joined him. "She's honest," Kennedy replied. "It's better." As the night wore on, Kennedy slipped out and returned to the rooftop, needing air. The city was quieter now, reflective, like her. And then she noticed a girl, young, barely 20, standing at the far edge, nervously holding a worn resume. Kennedy walked over. "You okay?" she asked. The girl startled, then blurted, "I heard this place used to be impossible to work at. But my aunt told me things changed, that a woman came in and made everyone uncomfortable, in the best way." Kennedy smiled softly. "Uncomfortable's where the truth lives." She took the resume. "Come back tomorrow morning," she said. "Let's talk properly." The girl's eyes lit up. "Thank you." As dawn cracked over the skyline, Kennedy stood alone once more, watching the first rays of sunlight hit the building's name. The Rhodes. A hotel. A battleground. A revolution. Brick by brick. Not because she was rich, not because she was CEO, but because she refused to be invisible, and she made sure no one else would be again. This story isn't just fiction, it's a reflection of something real, of the quiet battles happening every day behind closed doors, across counters, within boardrooms. Sometimes it takes just one voice to make the system tremble. Sometimes it takes yours, if you believe in stories that speak truth to power, of justice, of redemption, of standing tall when the world expects you to shrink. Then stay with us. Support this channel. Share it. Speak about it. Be part of the story. Because somewhere, someone like Kennedy is walking into a room where they don't think she belongs, and she's about to own it.